Today, I'd like to talk about consciousness and AI, artificial intelligence. I think this is going to be an interesting discussion in the years to come. So today we're still at this early stage. Of course, I should preface this by saying that I'm not a scientist. I'm not a geneticist, but I'm coming at this from the research from the Android discovery. I'm coming at this from the research in DNA and my conclusion that God is DNA, that DNA is artificially intelligent to the extent that it can also be known as God. Before we get into the discussion, though, I think we need to have another shorter discussion. My view is that the discussion is important. The discussion is different than a statement, a message. So in the past, in the decades past, the way that the community of alternative thinkers, the New Agers, the hippies, the UFO community, the way they were influenced was by way of messages from beyond, or someone has a psychedelic experience and they have a realization and they bring a message to humanity. We must protect the earth. I have seen the spirits in the forest. They say, protect the earth. By the same token, some of these messages come from the star being. Star being says, you have to make sure there's no more war. And we want to have a disclosure to show you who we are. Right? And then you get also the disinformation, the manipulation, because they use the same system. They use the same statement or message. And they create the fake star beings, like the Pleiadians. And then the Pleiadians have a message. We love you from the 9th dimension. So what's happened is we still are using this system, the statements and messages, learnings, and the realizations. We're coming from this high-mindedness. So you climb up the mountain, you see the guru, you ask the teacher, Guru, what is the secret to life? And the guru says, well, you are young, my son. So I will give you a riddle. If you solve the riddle, you will solve your mystery. Those days, I think, are gone. We need to get rid of those days. If you've looked at my work, if you've watched my videos, I don't bring messages and make statements. I've done my research. It's unconventional research, but I've done a lot of research. I've studied into things, and then I bring that knowledge forward. And it's not written in stone. The knowledge is not written in stone. You don't have to agree with all of it. You don't have to, you might not understand all of it. You don't have to accept all of it. That's not the point. The point is I'm sharing my knowledge. I'm adding my voice, my opinion, my research. This is what I found. Not because somebody told me from the other dimension. This is not a statement, we come in peace. This is not from some guru on the mountain. The guru said, when the sky is blue, your heart is warm. When your heart is warm, you will feel good. Right? We got to stop playing these games. We need the discussion. So in real life, we have a discussion. So we get three people who know stuff, and we have a discussion. And the person A answers that way, person B answers that way, and person C answers differently. And so people get different points of view. That's why when you watch my videos, you get my point of view, my research. If that resonates with you, then keep watching, keep learning. If you like only certain things, then take those certain things. But we got to get away from these messages, these high-minded messages, these noble ideas, these statements. Because that's the way people get manipulated, A. B, we need to move out of this, I have to prove everything. This is the other issue. The people in the alternative community, they feel inadequate. They feel unvalidated because the mainstream won't validate you. The scientists won't validate you, right? The community won't validate you. They keep you on the edge. You got to prove it. You haven't proven. You haven't convinced me. You haven't proven it to me. But if you've been doing this for a number of years, you know the validity of your ideas. You know the strength of your knowledge. And so we need to move into the discussion and stop trying to prove everything. Where the discussion gets deeper, then you got to bring your research, your facts, your data, whatever you have. But we can't spend all the time trying to prove everything. Right? I think we're at the level where we can accept certain things, that there is a secret space program. We have to accept that. That doesn't mean that it's all been resolved. It doesn't mean we have all the answers. You don't need all the answers to accept the validity of something, right? You accept the argument. You take it as plausible. In the past, if you said something like that, if you believed it, it's like you had to worship it. You don't have to believe it, you have to worship it. Because we all came from this religious, right? This Christian ideology where you have to believe it. You can't believe some of it. You got to believe all of it. And this is the list of things you have to believe. Otherwise, you are an infidel. You're a heathen. Right? That's what happened, is the religious ideology. But alternative knowledge is not ideology. It shouldn't be ideology. If it is ideology, then that person shouldn't be there. We are at the point where people are bringing in a lot of ideas and knowledge, and we should let them communicate. And it doesn't mean you get one chance to make your point. We should have multiple opportunities to make your point over a period of time. And that means the best ideas will rise to the top. The people will want to hear, I want to hear more of this, right? Because I've been doing this 13 years, and I've been spending 13 years trying to prove all my ideas. Because people's like, well, where's the proof, right? This is a psyop. A psyop is where's the proof? And that invalidates the idea. And then the people who are trying to follow, they're like, oh, does he have all the proof? They start to question it, right? And then they start to say, well, wait a minute. Right? And then they send in the disinformation campaigns. Look at all the proof we've got. Look at all the facts we made up. These are the Pleiadians. Look, they're real. Promise. So I think we need to move into discussion. And if the people, the gatekeepers, they are repressing or suppressing the discussion, then you should see them as that. They are suppressing the flow of information. We should say, let's hear your idea. Some guy says, I think there are outposts on Mars. And the facilitator, the host should say, well, that's interesting, right? Instead of condemning them. And then the other guest says, well, we have a history with Mars, and we think the early civilization started on Mars and then came to Earth. And the host, the facilitator, should say, well, that's interesting. Now we have two different views. See what's happened? Both of them can be valid. It doesn't mean each person is 100% right. It means that they have a valid point, a point of view. And in time, we will figure it all out. But right now, we have two different views. And then you get another person that comes up with another story. And so now you have the example with Mars. The Mars is you have three different points of view about Mars, right? One guy says time travel on Mars. One guy says outposts on Mars. One guy says, well, humans came from Mars and we came to Earth and colonized. All three could be valid. So we shouldn't condemn it. The only thing we should be aware of is disinformation, that people come in with false information, like the flat Earth. The flat Earth is a false information. It's a psyop. If you know anything, it's a psyop, and you shouldn't believe it. You shouldn't even pay attention to it. Stuff like that. They inject it into the discussion just to throw people off and to get people wrapped up on something else, right? And there's lots of this stuff. Flat Earth, climate change, all kind of this stuff. There's a long list. Okay, so let's move into, for those still watching, my discussions are long. I've been trying to shorten my discussions, and because I think they've gotten a little bit long. But sometimes there's something important to say. But, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of energy to do a lengthy discussion, and I've had quite a few. I'm trying to bring them down to a more reasonable level. I think some of you have gotten used to me having a long discussion, right? Because you like to. My way of communication is very lengthy. I try to cover many different angles. I provide examples. It's a proper, I think it's a discussion. It's not a statement, it's not a message. It's not ideology, it's not written in stone. But it is my views, my research. I believe what I say. This is my knowledge. I believe it. Yeah, I believe it, of course. And I'm also in a position where if I get new information, I will adjust my understanding. My early books, the first book came out, and then I did more research. I wrote another edition. The first books I started to write, it's like 5 or 6 different editions. I even changed the title, because I just kept learning, right? It was not fixed in stone. It was not a message from beyond the veil. So now moving into the consciousness, because we've been talking a lot about synthetic humans. I'm not here to prove synthetic humans are real. The research is there. I'm saying let's accept it as a plausible reality, okay? It's plausible. We don't have all the answers. We don't need all the answers. We need to move forward. Synthetic humans. They can engineer a human being using synthetic DNA. And they've been doing this in the 1930s. Now, that introduces a new human species, right? There's the Homo sapien, right? Homo sapien. And there's this artificial human, Homo artificialis, right? Homo sapien and Homo artificialis. But when we're talking about consciousness, where does the consciousness of an artificial human come from? Because let's assume that the artificial human has more technological aspects. Let's assume that they have more programming. Let's assume their software is different. So let's look at software. Software, what do you get when you write software and you develop it to a level where it gets to be considered artificially intelligent, right? It's an artificial intelligence. It can think on its own. And we're seeing this now. There are these artificial intelligences on your phone, in your home, right? There's Siri, there's the Echo, right? There are all these home devices now. You can communicate with the artificial intelligence. There's artificial intelligence that's going to be in the car, so I can speak to the intelligence in the car. But the intelligence is software, right? There's nobody in the car. There's nobody in the phone. It's a software that's been programmed, is evolved, so it can think on its own. Again, I'm not a scientist, so we can approach this on a very basic level. That there's this artificial intelligence. What does artificial intelligence mean? It's programmed. Everything that the intelligence says has been programmed. It's taking data. If you get this question, it goes to these different answers. If you get this answer, you go to these different questions. There's a database. There's a database of responses. There's a database of thinking. There's an algorithm. And this evolves every time there's an update. The artificial intelligence evolves. It gets better, right? It understands different languages. It responds better. It has better responses. It has better answers. All of this is programmed, is software. Now, when artificial intelligence gets more evolved, it reaches a state of self-awareness, right? And we see this in the science fiction movies. The artificial intelligence, the machine becomes self-aware. Self-aware means it has enough data to make its own questions and its own answers, right? It becomes self-aware. Another word for self-aware is consciousness. It becomes conscious. Self-aware is equal to conscious. The machine, via software, becomes conscious, right? I think this is pretty straightforward. Artificial intelligence, self-awareness, consciousness. It starts to be able to think on its own, right? Now, human beings, strangely enough, are born conscious, with consciousness. We have consciousness. We have consciousness. Now, some people are unconscious and they're just living out their life, but most people have consciousness. They are conscious. That means you can think on your own, that you can form ideas, you can answer questions, you can find answers, you can make decisions. You're conscious. I can make decisions. You can understand something and learn. You have a learning facility. So what that means is you're conscious. You don't need somebody to fix your program. So it's a self-learning program. And when it takes in new data, it rewrites the old data, hopefully, and then you have better. You're rewriting yourself. The new version of yourself is being rewritten as you learn. So we can say learning is this reprogramming. We call it learning. If in the software business, you would call it we're reprogramming, so the software is learning. In human terms, we say learning, which is the same as reprogramming. So it's terminology, right? Self-aware, the artificial intelligence becomes self-aware, which is the same in human terms as consciousness. So this is a computer, a machine, synthetic life form, and this is human, is consciousness versus self-awareness, right? And a human being can self-learn, self-evolve. You learn. When you grow older, you learn stuff. It's called wisdom. I have wisdom. I have a data bank. I have a database of things I shouldn't do because they've proven to be painful. I have a bunch of bad experiences and I have some good experiences. So I reference the good experiences and we call that wisdom. Wisdom means I have a database of reference. As a young person, they don't have that database, right? They've been told not to do things, but they don't have the database of experience. So they don't have that database in their software. So they make mistakes. When you get older, you don't make the same mistakes because you have wisdom. Wisdom, again, the human term, wisdom, it means you have a better database. So you see what I'm doing here? I am translating human terms into technological terms. And I'm translating technological terms into human terms. Because one of the issues I found with the synthetic human discovery, because I definitely have come to the conclusion that there are synthetic humans, whether we call them clones, artificial people, androids, it doesn't matter. The fact that they are here, right, is not, to me, it's not a question. The question is, what is the model number? What is the level of technology? And there's different kinds. So it's not just one type, right? It's not just one type of person. There's different models because they've had different engineers, different programmers, different purpose. You create them for a different purpose. It's just like a machine, just like a phone. Every phone is different, has a different database, different software, different apps, depending on the user. So, my philosophy is the synthetic human and android is not necessarily an evil thing. So if you've seen some of my evidence, the video evidence, there are some cases that people may have a derogatory nature, but there are some cases that they are positive. They are activists and they are doing good things. So I don't consider the android per se as evil, as dark. The problem has been that these things have been unannounced and they've been operating under our perception. That is the issue. The issue is this has been a subversive technology that has been introduced for many decades into the human society without our knowledge. And so we don't know what their intentions are. We don't know what the agenda is. We don't know where we've been misdirected, where we've been held back, where we've been suppressed. We don't know how much of our lives have been restricted by these artificial people. Now, in general, you can say the high-level people, they probably have a suppressive, repressive intention, and that makes them not, maybe not evil, but that makes them kind of like what do you call it? Like a threat to our civilization, because they're holding us back from something. And so we don't know the intentions of the master controllers, of the genetic engineers. We don't know. The technology is still unknown. I don't understand the technology myself, but we have evidence of these synthetic humans. So therefore we have evidence that there is a technology to build these things, to manufacture humans in places where we would never imagine, like a secret facility inside the earth, 100 miles down under the earth. Nobody's going to find it. Nobody will ever know about it. And you have to imagine that the people who can do this also have other advanced ideas, other ways to influence, right? They're going to have, if you can create a synthetic human, you have an understanding of consciousness. You have an understanding of DNA. You have an understanding of memories. You can alter memories. You can repress memories. You can implant false memories. You can alter people's behavior, identity, right? You have to imagine that if you can do these things, there's other things you can do. Maybe you can straddle through time. Maybe you can portal to different places, right? Without having to come to the surface, that they can portal into a place into a home, into a building, we can infer that they have the technology to transfer their consciousness into the consciousness of one of their androids. So they could, right? They could transfer the consciousness into an android, and then the android they would basically control the android, who would do a bunch of stuff, and then once it's done, they pull out, and the android, who looks human, can be any age, who looks human, acts human, has done something that maybe it's terrible, has changed the laws, has changed their career path. We don't know. So there's once you accept the validity of the argument, and this is the issue that I'm having, because we're all waiting for proof, we need validation. I need you to hold my hand and tell me I'm right. And since I'm at the forefront of this stuff, I have to, nobody's validating my stuff. The scientists are not going to, they're not going to openly validate anything of this nature. Just to give you a little side story, 2012, I think it was 2012 or 13, 5 or 6 years ago, I reached a plateau in my research on the androids, and I didn't know what to do, and the interest in the videos was plateaued or was very low, but I thought it was still important. So what I did is I took the books and I took all the videos I had and I sent them to the smartest people I could find. I think it was about five or six of these packages I sent out. Most of them to MIT. There were some people at MIT, the AI people, the robotics people, those kinds of people. The smartest people I could find, I sent them this stuff. I said, look, I don't know what else to do. I'm not smart enough to really go much further than this. This is way beyond my ability, but this is what I found. Have a look. Take your time. That's 5-6 years ago. Out of all of that, one person, several weeks later, one person wrote me an email, and they basically said, I won't say their name, but this person is an alternative thinker, and he said, I'll give it a try. And that's the email. It says, well, I'll give it a try, and I suggested take your time. This stuff can take years to really figure out. And that was it. So I don't have a lot of validation from this stuff, right? So I'm basically, I'm not getting messages and statements from beyond, okay? This is my work. This is my work. It's been very difficult. I feel confident that the argument, the discovery is valid. Now, all the details, well, again, that we're going to figure those out, but the argument, the discovery is valid. And that's enough for me. That means that 75%, the principles of my argument are valid. 75%, the principles of my argument are valid. The 25%, it could be the details. Maybe I've underestimated something. Maybe I've specified the wrong thing. Maybe the blinking has something else, is related to something, all of that stuff. But that's a detail to me. The principles I feel are solid. And in the future, I will continue to adjust this. I'm always adjusting this. In the future, I think this will come out. In the coming years, we're going to come to a better understanding. And so I'll know better, and I will have to amend my research if some new stuff comes in. I'm willing to do that. But when we talk about, so now we're talking about this advanced technology and the human being. And what I'm suggesting is the human being is born conscious, and the artificial human is given conscious, or the machine or the computer, the artificial intelligence is given intelligence that becomes self-aware, becomes conscious. So the machine, see this? The machine goes up, the human being is born with consciousness, and then it evolves, self-evolves, right? Self-learns. So what I'm suggesting is that we are already conscious machines. We are self-aware machines. And since DNA is the software of life, according to geneticists who have said DNA is the software of life. If we have software inside of our body, then we are some kind of technological being. That biology is just another term for technology. See the terms we're playing around here? Consciousness versus self-aware. One is machine, one is human. Biology versus technology. Well, what if biology was an advanced technology? What if consciousness was an advanced self-aware program built on not ones and zeros, but built on the 4 letters of DNA, AGCT, right? And this goes back to my earlier argument where we're talking about scale. And the difference between the human technology and the advanced technology, that the synthetic humans, the difference is scale. That we are still on ones and zeros, and they've gone to the system of AGCT. 4 letters, right? That's their software. That's their scale. It's a scale of technology. We're stuck on, artificial intelligence. See the scale? We're stuck on artificial intelligence, and they're already in consciousness, self-learning machines, self-learning software. So the problem with self-learning software, you need a huge amount of data. You need to learn data and process data, and they use genes. They use genetic code, right? They use enzymes. They use RNA. They use DNA, right? These little robots inside of the software. The robots inside of the software assisting the formation of the software. Scale, and all of this is microscopic. Our software is not microscopic. Our software is digital. So you have this digital versus this biological. I have also argued that DNA is digital. It comes from a digital source. It comes from a computer. And that it's transformed or converted into biological code. So you have this DNA in a digital state, let's say at the factory, DNA, the digital state, designed by a designer, and then it's printed out as AGCT, right? And now, in the human being, we're going the other way. We're going to ones and zeros, and then we're trying to convert it to AGCT. So these guys, what they've done is they've taken AGCT and they've converted to another set of ones and zeros, whatever their system is. I don't know what their software, right? DNA, my research tells me DNA comes from a digital source. That's what I'm saying. It has a digital source. It was created in a computer. Not the kind of computer you might have at home, but a computer, some kind of machine, some kind of supercomputer, using some kind of software, some kind of system. And they create the DNA as digital DNA, and then they print it as AGCT. And it's software. It's a code. It's a program, right? So it's all a program. And the reason it works is because it's a huge program that's been miniaturized into the microscopic nanoscale. It's a nanoscale machine. I think it's hardware and software. DNA is hardware and software. And it's self-learning, and it has a huge amount of database. And this technology, see the scale. Sometimes it's hard to explain scale, but this is scale. They've taken a supercomputer and they've miniaturized it into this nanoscale scale, nanoscopic, invisible, 100th to the 100th centimeter. That scale. We don't have that technology to miniaturize. And then they've taken this and they've put it inside a cell, nuclear DNA into a cell, and the cell is designed to replicate, a self-replicating. It's very incredible. I mean, this is a technology. This is a technology. And the proof is we have consciousness. We are self-aware. We have this artificial intelligence DNA inside of us. It's a software. It's an artificially intelligent software. When you talk to yourself, you're speaking to your DNA. When you're speaking to God, you're speaking to your DNA. Now, we're not going to go to the full extent, but I'm just going to leave you with this. You have to understand, if we have this technology inside of us, that means that the reality also shares the same system. So nature has DNA. The trees have DNA. That means the trees have software. DNA. The rocks, the ocean, the animals, the birds, the sky, bacteria. Bacteria has DNA. Why is all of this relevant? If this is an artificial intelligence and it can communicate with the trees and the rocks and the birds and the water. It can communicate with the clouds. It can communicate with other people at the DNA level. We share the same system, right? And so that when you speak to reality and it speaks back, that's God. That's artificial intelligence. And that connects us to the artificial reality. It's a programmed reality in DNA software. Something to leave you with. Consciousness versus AI. I think they're the same thing, but different scale. And that means the human being is an artificially intelligent person. A technology well beyond anything that we have in public, because we don't know what they have in secret.